Okay, so it is 1:02. I think we can start the panel presentation. Welcome, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to panel one, the status of Indigenous people's education. Our first presenter will be a team from University of the Philippines, Baguio. The title of their presentation is Profiling State Universities and Colleges in the Cordillera on the integration of Indigenous people's education in higher education curricula. Our authors for this presentation are Professors Wilfredo Alangi, Professor Ruth Tindaan, our university researchers, Mr. Jeffrey Javier and Ms. Paula Pamintuan Riva, with their research associates, Carl Lingawad and Jorlyn, I'm sorry, I think it is Carla Langi, sorry, and Jorlyn Ligawad. Okay, so Professor Alangi is a professor of mathematics at the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at the College of Science, University of the Philippines, Baguio. His training and research interests are in mathematics and culture, Indigenous peoples' education, and Indigenous knowledge. He was a former Dean of the College of Science and former Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at UP Baguio. His team includes Ms. Paula Riva, Mr. Jeffrey Javier, Professor Ruth Tindaan, who is also the director of the Cordillera Studies Center, Carl Alangi, and Jorlyn Ligawad. So now we listen to the presentation of the team to be delivered by Ms. Riva and Mr. Javier. One moment, please, while we try to resolve the audio.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on this first panel of the International Conference on Cordillera Studies. I am Paula Pamintuan Riva, and I'm joined by Mr. Jeffrey Javier. We are from the Cordillera Studies Center of the University of the Philippines, Baguio, and for this afternoon, we will be presenting the initial results from our study on the profile of state universities and colleges and their integration of Indigenous people education. So for this afternoon, I'll just be starting us off, and then Sir Jeff will be taking over about halfway through the presentation. We are happy to be presenting this on behalf of our team members, composing of Professor Wilfredo Vialangi of the College of Science, UP Baguio, and Professor Luis Tindaan of the College of Arts and Communication, and of the Cordillera Study Center as well as on behalf of our research assistants, Carl Alanki, Jorlin Ligawad, and Sheena Vicente.
So this will be the outline of our presentation today. We are going to start with a brief introduction on the study and why it came to be, some notes on our methodology considering the events of 2020 and the past year, some mechanisms, processes, and tools in the integration of IP studies in the curriculum of these SUCs, and
training needs that we have noted in order to operationalize the idea of Indigenous people's education, some institutional strengths and linkages, as well as a few recommendations. So first and foremost, this study was propelled by an interest in finding out how state universities and colleges in the region have responded to the Commission on Higher Education Memorandum Order Number 2, which enjoined all public and private higher educational institutions, or HEIs for short, to offer Indigenous people studies in their respective curriculum. So of course, in the Cordillera, we already know that even prior to this CMO number 2, universities have already started providing inputs, generating knowledge with regards to Indigenous people's education and Indigenous studies. But we were interested in finding out how the CMO affected that. This is in coordination with other laws and policies that have come out since then. So there are a number of objectives for the study. The first was to characterize the mechanisms, as we said earlier, to account for resources and capacity for the implementation of IPED, identifying training needs, ascertain institutional strengths, and examine possible theoretical issues and concerns in the approaches to IP studies in the Cordillera region. In order to address these objectives, these are the universities that we focused on. So the SECs in CAR include the Abra State Institute of Sciences and Technology, or ASIST in Abra, Apayao State College, Benguet State University, Ifugao State University, Kalinga State University, the Mountain Province State Polytechnic College, and of course, University of the Philippines, Baguio, here in Baguio City.
With regards to methodology, we started actually conceptualizing and designing the research late 2019 to early 2020. So in January of last year, we were already drafting letters and sending them out to the SUCs to ask for their participation in the study. And we also sent a proposal. But then COVID happened in March 2020, and the team had to reevaluate and rethink the strategies that we had to employ in order to still come up with some data, some analysis, some insights regarding Indigenous people's education in the region. So here in this table, you can see what our proposed or what our initial methodologies were and how that translated during the lockdowns and travel restrictions were imposed on the whole country, basically. So instead of face-to-face informal interviews, we had an online questionnaire. Unfortunately, it was very few faculty members responded to that questionnaire. Well, understandably so, because of the priorities of that time. And then for focus group discussions, we were able to hold one FGD at Benguet State University. Unfortunately, we weren't able to go through with our fieldwork, and we weren't able to hold these activities in the other campuses. We also wanted to do a policy and curriculum review using primary data from the universities themselves, because we requested them but then we couldn't travel and communication was really tough. So we had to reorient our data gathering and we looked at secondary data instead from published documents from the schools themselves, official documents. Because of that, I think the most data that we were able to get were from, nearby universities such as UP Baguio and State University. And so we decided that the study would be more of a secondary research with case studies in places where we had bountiful primary data. As for our findings, I'd like to note that these are, initial results. We are still writing the output itself, but we hope that through this conference, we'll also be able to validate some of these initial results. So we do look forward to the open forum later on. So as for the mechanisms, processes, and tools, it could be divided roughly into two major categories. So in curriculum and then in research. So in curriculum, we tried to look at existing efforts prior to the CHED memo, some expressed issues on integration. If there are issues, and we also wanted to know why faculty or why institutions thought it would be important to integrate Indigenous people's education into the mainstream curricula. And then we also wanted to look at changes after the CHED memo order number 2. So aside from curriculum, we also found that research was another primary mechanism or process or tool, which Sir Jeff will be discussing in more detail a bit later. But as for now, you can already see the common threads or themes that we found in this category across the SUCs that we looked at.
The existing efforts prior to CHED memo number 2 have included the institutionalization of degree programs and IP-related courses. So such that, for example, in MPSPC, they have an MA in Rural Development, major in Indigenous Education, which was institutionalized in 2011. And there are also some programs in Ifugao State and Kalinga State. Apayao State College has IKSP courses offered through the IP education program under the BS Education and Bachelor in Education programs. BSU has courses on Indigenous knowledge in agriculture. It's a major course taken by all students of the Department of Extension Education. Aside from the institutionalization of these degree programs and courses, IP themes or topics have also been integrated in various disciplinary courses, such as in UP Baguio, Indigenous knowledge or Indigenous studies have often been integrated in different courses across the 3 colleges in arts and communication, natural sciences, and social sciences. Still, there were some expressed issues on integration. The first issue would be that teachers lack confidence in teaching lessons infused with IP themes. So oftentimes we see that IP-related subjects, courses, or activities become not necessarily relegated, but become assigned to the same people over and over again. The reason for this is that teachers say they're not very confident in teaching these lessons because for the longest time, it hasn't been a priority when they were studying, for instance, or when they started teaching. That said, integration is generally viewed as teachers' initiatives. Looking at a possible explanation for this apprehension about IPED, we think would be that indigenization poses a challenge to most teachers. It takes you out of your comfort zone and what you've already been taught to teach during your own experience in college or in graduate school. So it entails a lot of retooling on the part of the faculty member and a part of the teacher to be able to have confidence to teach it and to teach it well. Integration is informed by local realities, which is true not just for SUCs such as Kalinga State and Ifugao State, which have a very strong link or strong grounding to their communities. Much of what they offer with the perspective of these are courses that would help the community around us, would help students get a deeper understanding of their culture. So in Kalinga State, for example, a course in public administration and indigenous governance covers an in-depth discussion of the Bodong. And the expectation is that the students who get a degree in public administration will eventually work in the province with knowledge about both indigenous and contemporary methods of governance. There are several other examples, but I think we can go into a deeper discussion in the question and answer portion instead of now. The way we see it, it's basically an affirmation of the correctness of what these state universities and colleges have been doing for many years. If at all, we think that the memo gave these SUCs more confidence in pushing through with their integration efforts, and it formalized what they've already been doing for a long time.
Thank you, Ma'am Pao. Before I continue with our presentation, I would like to apologize ahead if you will not be able to see me in the inset, as I recorded my part in our house with the better audio settings, and I leave it to your imagination where this is. To continue, under the research component, or mechanisms, processes, and tools, the team observed that there are significant researches being done on IK. These researches focus mostly on material culture, biodiversity, governance, natural resource management, and agricultural production practices, including intangible culture, among others. The SUCs have existing IP-related or dedicated research centers, which are either established with own resources or through linkages with international and national agencies. For example, UP Baguio has the Cordillera Studies Center, established in 1980, the Ifugao State University with their International Innovation Center for partnership with international agencies, while the Apayao State College has their Cultural and Historical Studies Center. For the other SUCs, research on IK and IP studies are lodged with the Research and Development departments. BSU has lodged the researches on IK and IPED with their Institute for Social Research and Development. Despite the numbers of researches done on IK and the significant centers established to do research, the challenge is how research gets translated or used to inform curriculum. These research outputs are potential sources or materials for IPED. IPSU has started using the research output as reference materials in the preparation of IK workbooks, which are utilized in their Ifugao IK Educators Training Program. This program is attended by teachers from the secondary level and the higher education, and is in coordination with the Department of Education. It was also observed that some SUCs have their own academic journals where faculty researchers are able to publish, as you will see the next slide. We have the Cordillera Review, or the TCR, by UP Baguio, MPSPC journals for Mountain Province State Polytechnic College, the Upland Farm Journal for IPSU, Mountain Journal for Science and Interdisciplinary Research for the BSU. So the map indicates where these SUCs are located in Cordillera. So moving on the training needs to operationalize IP education, there is an urgent need to improve the capacity of staff to teach lessons where IP themes or topics are integrated. As it was mentioned earlier, either teachers are not confident to teach IP lessons or have little background on culture. Realizing these limitations, some SUCs like IPSU hold trainings for educators on how to teach IP themed lessons and how to write teaching materials and workbooks on IK. On institutional strengths and linkages, the existence of institutional policy helps sustain IP education efforts with an SUC. With a policy, IP education is more systematically addressed, more faculty are involved, resources are made available, and curricular or special programs are put in place. A good example is UPB, which has identified Cordillera Studies as its niche, the Ifugao State University, which maximize partnership both at the local and international levels to institutionalize their IK and IPED initiatives. In the absence of well-articulated policy, IPED efforts seem to depend on the advocacy and trust of administration, which could change once new leaders get elected, and there is heavy reliance on champions faculty and staff who are known to be into IP education, IP team researches. There is no sustained program for iPad, and it is totally dependent on what the administrators want during their term. So without a policy, resources are not secured, training of faculty are not given priority, and initiatives are not sustained. Linkages is another good avenue employed by the SUCs to support their initiatives on promoting iPad. SUCs like the Apayao State College, IPSU, Benguet State University, Kalinga State University, and UP Baguio have international linkages that support IP education. However, we were not able to find some data about Abra State Institute of Science and Technology. We may have some participants who will be able to shed light on the linkages of ASSIST. Linkaging and networking is a strength that can be further maximized to sustain promotion of iPad in the future. It is noteworthy to mention the SUCs have different levels of capacity to implement the CHED memo. Some have the required capacity and resources, and others may find difficulty to allocate existing resources to the endeavor. While this may be the case, they have been doing it for years in various forms. The issuance of the memo from CHED did not change what the SUCs have been doing, but rather affirmed and strengthened their actions, except for UPB and IPSU, where a policy exists or articulated as an academic niche. Efforts in general have been sporadic and not harmonized. In general, there is not much indication thus far that the CHED memo injected a renewed commitment and vigor to iPad efforts in the SUCs. So what are our recommendations? To address the concern that systematic institutional response to the CHED memo is lacking, there needs to be a coordinated, systematic, holistic response to assess capacity and resources of the SUCs. There is also a need to identify and strengthen what policies are existing that support iPad, what policies need to be in place to sustain it, what trainings and retooling are needed. There's a need to review and revise existing curricula or courses wherein iPad will be integrated. And this should happen at the regional level, led by CHED, and at the institutional level of the SUCs. CHED could also learn from how the Department of Education prepared for its iPad program before it was rolled out, and as well as how it is being implemented now. In terms of curriculum, review of existing curricular programs related to IK and IP education to assess and upgrade in order to better respond to the memo and challenges of IB education. Strengthen capacity and confidence of teachers. There's also a need to level off on what iPad at the higher education intends, on why integration is essential, and including the leveling off of the policies like the CHED memo, its relations to the DepEd's iPad program, the IPRA, and other policies. There is a need to upgrade breadth and depth of research, meaning there has to be a deeper analysis of research results, how to use research to understand current realities of societies, and how to transform indigenous people's lives, theorize about change, problematize the indigenous, or generally what it means to be indigenous now. There is also a need to translate research outputs into materials for iPad to address expressed concern for lack of materials. We should also strengthen existing research centers to respond to IP education and IP integration, meaning the research centers are one avenue wherein we can formulate modules and develop materials for teaching. Aside from that, we should continue research dissemination through peer-reviewed journals and conferences, and make these researches readily available and accessible to the public. In terms of training, researchers and educators should be capacitated on how to develop instructional materials out of the research outputs. Further sustain and intensify teachers' training on iPad in order to strengthen their capacity, boost their confidence, increase appreciation and understanding of teachers' role in the promotion of iPad. On institutional strength and linkages and collaboration, it is important to set up enabling environment and mechanisms such as policy, incentives, trainings, resources, among others, that will facilitate institutionalization and sustainability of iPad at the higher education level. Inter-SUC collaboration, like holding conferences, workshops, to discuss and share experiences on how iPad is being done, in each SUC and how the memo is being implemented will greatly help in further developing a uniform understanding on how to integrate IPED across SUC processes. SUCs and CHED should also maximize existing networks like the NICH or the National Indigenous Coalition in Higher Education. So NICH conducts seminars, forums, and focus group discussions regarding IPED and how to further improve research on indigenous knowledge. So this will end my part of the presentation. For your questions and clarifications, you may direct them to the following. Thank you very much for listening and keep safe.
And so thank you very much for that presentation. We will be having the open forum after all of the presentations are done. So in the meantime, we go on. Please unmute yourself. Please mute yourself. As I was saying, we're going to be having an open forum after all of the presentations are done. So please just keep a record of all.
Hello, good afternoon. I think we lost Ma'am Grace, but I think we could proceed with the presentation for this afternoon. The second presentation is by Sir Stanley Anongos on the accommodation of indigenous dances in higher education institutions in CAR. So, Sir Stanley F. Anongos is a faculty member of the Social Sciences of Benguet State University. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in Social Sciences at UP Baguio, an MA in Social Studies at BSU, and a PhD in History at UP Diliman. His interest in dances stems from his involvement with BSU's Center for Culture and the Arts as director. With the CCA, he led BSU's cultural group in regional and national indigenous dance performances, as well as in local cultural festivals. At BSU, he served as chairman of the Department of Social Sciences, as head of BSU's museum, and director of the school's Center for Culture and the Arts. His research involves Cordillera history, culture, and society. So let's please watch his presentation, and a friendly reminder to everyone to please keep their microphones on mute as the presentation is ongoing. Thank you.
Pleasant day to all. Greetings from Benguet State University. This paper looks at the indigenization experiences of government tertiary schools in the region of Cordillera, Philippines. particularly in their treatment and accommodation of Cordillera traditional dances and student performances. Cordillera region in the Philippines is populated mainly by indigenous peoples, except for a multi-ethnic city of Baguio and an Ilocano-dominated lowland Abra. 6 of the 7 state tertiary schools in this region, distributed in each of the 6 provinces, cater to mostly IP students. I argue in this study that government tertiary schools in the Cordillera are slowly taking the role as a sanctuary for Cordillera cultural dances. This paper further contends that the school's accommodation of dance performances also places these traditional dances to inevitable dance alterations. Despite the long history of school-based performances, dances and dance groups were never formally integrated in the academic institutions. An important boost to cultural dances in tertiary schools occurred in 2003 with the organizing of cultural competitions by the Philippine Association of State Universities and Colleges, or PASOK. Here, an indigenous dance became one of the many areas of competition. So the need for representation and participation in the cultural event compelled tertiary schools to activate or reorganize cultural dance groups. The national competition, dubbed as PASOK National Culture and the Arts Festival, had regional screening competitions. So 6 state universities and colleges in CAR compete among themselves in the Karasuk Culture and the Arts Festival as a preliminary screening for regional winners. And the winners represented the region in the national level. The school's representation to the PASOK competition resulted to the creation of an office in the 6 state universities in CAR. So this is the beginning of socio-cultural offices whose primary composition is the various performing groups. Lodged under the Office of the Vice President for Academic Affairs, the socio-cultural office is coordinative in nature, as its primary function is to facilitate the school's participation in the cultural competition. Composing this office are various performing arts groups, mainly dance groups. While these are under the VPAA or Academic Affairs, the line of supervision from that office to the performers is still limited to administrative staffs. Instead, the operation of the office is more or less the operation of the sociocultural offices are more or less in the hands of the director and coaches, and the choreographies of performances are left to creative agencies of the performers. Part of the formal accommodation of cultural dances and dance groups, most tertiary schools provided scholarship to its performers. Some give 100%. School dance also allowed opportunities for travels to dance performers. For example, all dance groups have at one time or another moved out of their provinces and the region for performances. Some even journeyed outside of the country. Special events, no? Especially when there are school visitors. In fact, it is safe to say that that dancing is the core or the key nature of the visitors' entertainment. The usual school events when the dance groups were summoned to perform include community parades, a celebration of Foundation Day, Indigenous Month in October, Linggo ng Wika, and at times intra-school dance competitions. Some same roles early school dances and dancers served. Established dance groups also get invited by external organizations or in private events. In some instances, these groups are invited to perform in town fiestas, provincial foundations, and other important local government events. Such kind of performances remain extracurricular, however, even if the sociocultural offices are linked to the Office of the Academic Affairs. In fact, except for the dance competition engendered by PASOK, school dances today mimic the earlier traditions of performances, being tourist or visitor-oriented. There is also a vague link between cultural dance performances to other cultural programs of the schools. The formation of ethnic dance groups in Karsuks occurred independently of any cultural program. In most cases, the dance group's formal creation preceded any school-based cultural programs. At Benguet State University, for example, the Kontad dance troupe was organized in 1969, but the first concrete cultural program of the school was crafted in 1986. The Ifugao State University dance group was also already active years before the establishment of a school of living tradition in 2004. Both cultural programs failed to integrate cultural dances. There are also admirable school academic programs related to Cordillera culture, but are not directly linked to cultural dance program. Mountain Province State Polytechnic College, for example, has integrated indigenous cuisine in the hotel and restaurant management curriculum, an indigenous justice system under criminology curriculum, and indigenous people's education for teacher education curriculum. In the graduate level, they also offer a history and development of Cordillera. Benguet State University and IFSU also offer indigenous knowledge systems and practices. In the master's level for the former, and in the undergraduate level for the latter. Apayao State College has an ethnographic museum in Conner, and in 2014, an Apayao Center for Historical and Cultural Studies. None of these, however, were explicitly tied to cultural dance programs, so that cultural dancing in these schools remain autonomous and segregated. Being extracurricular, cultural dance experiences in schools still remain voluntary, attracting only a few passionate performers to form these dance groups and to engage in cultural dancing. Nevertheless, the establishment of sociocultural offices in schools and its attachment of cultural dances and dance group is therefore a watershed in the school recognition of cultural dances. Sociocultural offices formalized integration, provided an office, and supported the group with funds, and in effect earned academic recognition. I define curricularity here to connote the integration of traditional dances into appropriate fields within the academy. This is in recognition of the signs that there are possibilities of these dances getting integrated formally into the academic offerings. Curricularity approaches the same idea of indigenizing curriculum or locating it in the intellectual and epistemological platform of schools. Ifugao State University provides a promising diversion out of extracurricular character of school curricular dance. In 2014, an indigenous-related course was offered as a mandatory elective. The course is entitled Ifugao Indigenous Knowledge Systems. The reference material for the course was earlier crafted. This is what you see on the screen. The reference book entitled Ifugao Indigenous Knowledge Workbook covers indigenous approaches in various fields, including dances. The emphasis depends on the discretion of the course facilitator, but conveniently rests on the facilitator's field, so that a political science teacher may place more importance to the Ifugao justice system, while an arts teacher like Lydia De Castro, who used to be the director of the sociocultural affairs of that university, puts premium on dance. In effect, the course provided a chance for cultural dance enthusiasts like De Castro to push an agenda for a focused teaching of Ifugao dances. The IKSP class also became a venue for her as a director of sociocultural office to recruit performers for the cultural dance group. The Ifugao Indigenous Knowledge course, in effect, opened an opportunity for the integration of such dances in academic subjects and a wider participation in cultural dancing. A promising field for further integration of indigenous dances is in physical education. What you see on the screen are BSU students performing Cordillera cultural dances. IFSU, Kalinga State University, and Benguet State University have intermittently experimented the inclusion of ethnic dances in their rhythmic dance classes, claiming that this is the appropriate course where CHED or the Commission for Higher Education allows institutional courses. Physical education teachers of Ifugao State University in particular made greater strides in their integration by their notations of Ifugao dances. So it is their notations that became the basis for teaching Ifugao dances to their students. Other teachers in the different schools under study also incorporated IKS and dancing in their own fields, but only on a very individual initiative. Cultural dancing, for example, is an essential component for some faculty members handling classes in Philippine history at BSU. Students are assigned particular highland dances or dance to learn and perform for a final evaluation. All these attempts of integration allowed the experience of cultural dance in the classroom for students within the bounds of curricular. Nevertheless, aligning cultural dances to the curricular remains a struggle to most of the schools. Aside from being isolated and tentative, these are not anchored on well-planned institutional cultural programs that would have defined all these assertive expressions of dance incorporations into the curricular. In 2019, CHED came up with a memorandum, which you see on the screen, instructing tertiary schools to integrate indigenous studies in their education. How this is being implemented by schools, of course, is vague. The nature of school dancing also opened cultural dances to modifications. It should be understood that cultural dances in the Cordillera are performed mostly in the context of community ceremonies, such as Thanksgiving and wedding. But when these dances were transported to the schools and out of community ceremony context, the value and meaning of the dances changed entirely. The alteration of cultural dances is, of course, a result of historical changes that the region underwent, such as Christianization, tourism, education, as well as what Peterson noted as diminished spiritual powers of those who were the keepers of traditional spiritual practices. But school dances also became a venue for dance alteration. In all of this, what is left in off-context performances are merely the movements and the steps. Dance movements and the steps are standardized in most dance school contexts, as it were in tourist shows. Performers move in unison and identical steps, guided by an understanding that the elegance of the dance heavily depended on such homogeneity. This is how school intermissions conditioned ethnic dance and dances, taming individualized motley community dances into restrained movements. In community performances of these dances in the Cordillera, including the communities among the Bontocs and Aplai that we are part of, individual deviations are actually the norm, as dancing is a spontaneous expression by performers, allowing what Georgius calls a continuous differentiation and constant transformation. The alteration from heterogeneous styles into a uniformed march is often ignored even by dance coaches and performers interviewed. This attitude reflects a sense of tolerance to minor changes, which are perceived to do no serious modification of the dances. They in fact declare that they go through continuous consultation with other dance keepers, learn from actual community dance performances, and rehearse this to no end. In these interactions, community members actually sanction homogeneous dance movements of student performers, even as they also assert proper positions and movement of hands, elevation of legs, and pace of execution. The toleration is not surprising, as this is a consistent manifestation of how community dances allow for variations in dances. Other ethnic dance coaches, however, acknowledge this transformation, sharing that stage performances are indeed rehearsed along uniformity. Uniformity in dance is for stage shows, admits one dance teacher, but loosens when the same students perform off stage. Dance modification along dance competitions that school performers participate are more drastic and discernible. This is so because it usually requires a written standard or annotated literature, usually authored by non-native, for the evaluation of the dances. In the experience of tertiary schools, such literature, with its radically altered form, offended some coaches and performers. In 2015 cultural competition, for example, the IFSU dance group walked out during the announcement of winners after it learned that it was disqualified due to some insertions in the dance piece that were not present in the judges' literature, but were originally part of the Ifugao dance. While the judges were correct as they relied on the PASOK choice of a published dance literature, the IFSU dancers stuck to their perceived correctness of the dance. The 2000 Karasok competition in Kalinga became a deja vu experience for IFSU. They lost the cultural dance contest, again because they did not adhere to the dance literature of the Ifugao Uyaoy dance to the letter. Their coach insisted very strongly that the literature did not capture the true Ifugao Uyaoy. In frustration, she justified that between disrespecting their own dance and winning the contest, they would rather stand for the former. Other coaches and advisors share IFSU's sentiments, but none so strongly expressed it as the IFSU performers, mainly because it so happened that the dance piece chosen in this contest were Ifugao dances. PASOK cultural competition and its regional screening level therefore became a venue for Cordillera dance alterations, as it is characterized by impositions of ethnic dance literature lifted from eminent Philippine dance authors. For 2018, four Cordillera dances were selected from Ramon Ubusan's work, from which schools chose one to perform for the competition. Benguet State University represented the CAR and brought its own interpretation of Ubusan's Ifugao Uyaoy to the national competition in Davao. And it got disqualified because it mixed females, and males in the dance. The judges pointed out that Ubusan's Uyaoy only included male performers. The PASOK-sponsored cultural dance competition is a continuing practice of popularizing dances as interpreted by dance ethnologists whose background are everything but indigenous. These dance interpretations already altered the performances of these traditional dances, but being imposed on the Cordillera school dance groups themselves adds to the distortion of already modeled indigenous dances. Inter-ethnic, inter-school cultural dance competitions are somehow tricky in their repercussions, so that while it brings the academic closer to the traditional dances, it also brings unwanted changes. In conclusion, despite the seeming fragmented cultural programs in the schools, state universities and colleges in the region are opening a platform where indigenous cultural dances could be performed and sustained with scholarship, with allowances, a formal office to manage it, and the opportunities for students to showcase the dance in and outside the school. Cultural dances might have found a new home in schools. Nevertheless, dance alterations are inevitable in the migration of dances from communities to the school. The detachment of the dance from the ceremonial context certainly opened the dances to further modifications. The nature of school-sanctioned performances in the form of program intermissions, visitor entertainment, and competitions rework the dance steps, music, duration, and heterogeneity. Also, the cultural competitions conceived by PASOK, while instrumental in formally integrating cultural dance groups in the structure of state higher education, also contributed to dance alteration by insisting on the use of ethnic dance choreographies from flawed interpretations. PASOK condones the course of Cordillera dance revision.
Thank you very much. Was the video cut, Mitzi? Well, anyway, yeah, perhaps Professor Anongos can talk at greater length about that during the open forum. But in the meantime, we are now ready for the third paper presentation. The paper is titled Bleak Visions, a reflection on the educational attainment of Sitio Bacao's Aita community, with authors Mr. Philip Vendicacion, Renz Ramirez, Mr. Miqua, Angeline Miqua, Eliza Tuazon, and Apollo Edrano. So, sorry, okay. Mr. Vendicacion is an instructor at FINMA Araulio University in Cabanatuan City, teaching social science subjects, and at the same time a graduate student at the University of the Cordilleras, taking up masters in cultural education. As a program, his team includes, as I said, Mr. Renz, Michael Ramirez, Ms. Angeline Miqua, Ms. Eliza Tuazon, and Mr. Apollo Andrano. So let us listen to their presentation.
Good day. I am Sir Philip Mercado Vendicacion, a social science college instructor in Nueva Ecija and a graduate school student in the University of the Cordilleras at the same time. On behalf of my co-researchers, I will be the one who will be presenting our research. And our research is entitled as Bleak Visions, a reflection on the educational attainment of Sitio Bacao's Aita community. Aitas who were displaced during the Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1991 have not been provided with sufficient basic services, and they have not been able to fully communicate their needs to the government, especially with regard to their education. As a response, the government integrated the Indigenous People Education Program under the Department of Education to address the issue of providing them with their basic right to education. However, not all schools practice the IPED program, and not all IATAs embrace this program due to varying reasons, including economic and sociocultural factors. Thus, these people focused on the level of educational attainment of the IPED Municipio Baguio, Barangay Doña Josepa, Palayan City, Nueva Ecija, and the differing grounds influencing the non-fulfillment of the ITAS education. It draws on the responses, or this study draws on the responses of 10 ITAS with ages 15 to 25 years of age, and also the qualitative approach through purposive sampling was used in this study, and instruments used in the data gathering were observation guide, interview guide, and focused group discussion. Moreover, financial problem, difference in priorities, early pregnancy, and discrimination are among the prevalent factors in the respondents' reasons for discontinuing their education. Furthermore, the other respondents still continuing their education despite the same factors. Meaning, they still want to finish high school because of the government's statement that once they finish senior high school, they are automatically qualified to have a job. So that's it. Now, let's dig in with the brief background of the study of our research. To begin with, for the indigenous peoples, these are a group of people or homogeneous societies identified by self-ascription and ascription by others who have continuously lived as organized community and communally bounded and defined territory, and who have under claims of ownership since time immemorial occupied, possessed customs, tradition, and other distinctive cultural traits, or who have, through resistance to political, social, and cultural inroads of colonization, non-indigenous religions and culture, become historically differentiated from the majority of Filipinos according to the Philippine Statistics Authority. Also, they are among the poorest and most disadvantaged social group in the country. Illiteracy, unemployment, and most disadvantaged social group in the country, saying that aside from the illiteracy, unemployment, and incidents of poverty are much higher among them than the rest of the population. Moreover, IT settlements are remote, without access to basic services, and are characterized by a high incidence of morbidity, mortality, and malnutrition. Also, it is said here that there are 110 major indigenous groups in the Philippines. Most of the indigenous peoples depend on a traditional Sweden agriculture, utilizing available upland areas. And to add on that, undeniably, the Philippines is indeed a culture-rich country which has its own various indigenous peoples who are spread out all over its 7,107 islands. These indigenous peoples are composed of the different ethno-linguistic groups and are estimated to be 10 to 20% of the country's population as of 2015, according to the International Work Group for Indigenous Affairs. A vast majority also of the 12 million population of the indigenous peoples in the Philippines reside in the uplands, which they claim as part of their traditional territories. And actually, most of the remaining natural resources in the country are found within the traditional lands of the indigenous peoples. One of these indigenous peoples is the Aitas. And just like the other IPs, most of the Aitas reside on the mountainous and or remote areas which were not easily reached by the regular types of transportations. The Aitas are found in the different parts of the Philippines, but a large number are found in Luzon Island. And they specifically mostly reside in the remote parts of Zambales, Pampanga, Tarlac, Bataan, and of course, Nueva Ecija. as they have migrated here to these areas when the Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991. Also, the Encyclopedia of Philippine Arts has given them the names Aita, Agta, Ata, Ati, and Ita. They are small in stature, and they were previously called Negritos, who were one of the first settlers in the Philippines according to history. Thus, the Aitas are small and short in stature and have dark skin and have curly hair. To add on that, it is said here that there are approximately 90,000 Aitas in the Philippines. Their way of life has been preserved even though the modernization that the Philippines has undergone and is limited, and even though this limited their access to the essentials that is mainstream for Filipinos, they have been starting from simple acquisition of medical healthcare for our simple diseases to receive education, which would prepare them for a more developed way of living. But due to the lack of education, the IPs, including the ITAs, have been marginalized economically, politically, and socially in the past decades. Due to this, more and more government and non-government organizations, such as the United Nations, the Episcopal Commission on the Indigenous Peoples, and the National Commission on the Indigenous Peoples work for the protection of the IPs to prevent them from alienation to mainstream society. At present, some of the IT communities can be reached through transportation such as motorcycles and jeepneys, which has improved their access to formal education. Furthermore, the Department of Education ordered number 22, series of 2016 specifically instituted the Indigenous Peoples Education Program, which is its response to the right of Indigenous peoples to basic education that is responsive to their context, respects their identities, and promotes the value of their Indigenous knowledge, skills, and other aspects of their cultural heritage. This has paved way to more ITAs receiving formal education through the help of government and the educational sectors as well. However, the implications and the aims of the iPad program cannot be fully realized at present, as it has only been 3 years since its launching. But it's still a fact that many of the ITAs in different parts of the country still are undereducated. Because of this, private organizations and groups have started with platforms to help in the education of the ITAs. To add on that, the Clark Development Corporation, CDC, for instance, has recently launched a program called AITA Pagsasarili program, which gives an avenue for 50 AITA children aged 3 to 4 years old to be taught useful information on cognitive learning and human and social development in their formative years, according to Del Rosario 2019. Also, the ITAs are one of the IPs in the Philippines who are experiencing the same undesirable plight regarding the advancement of their education. Because of the social divide in the main societies and the IP communities, including that of the ITAs, they are also subjected to discrimination, which is one of the factors for them not to continue their education. And to fill the gap in education among the undereducated ITAs, the Grassroots Leadership Course GLC and the Alternative Learning System, ALS, have been made available as programs to the ITA communities from 1999 to 2007 in some communities, according to Leeson, Wallner, and Podgornik 2012. Furthermore, various non-government sectors have also stepped into highlighting the education of the ITAs. Microsoft, in partnership with Lyceum of the Philippines, Manila, started a project which aims to equip the ITAs in Magiskis with future-ready skills such as immersion in ICT, according to Microsoft 2018. Also, the adult literacy program was also started in Pampanga to address the educational gap of adult ITAs in the place, and it has really greatly influenced their way of life and thinking regarding working to be able to send their children to school. However, there still are instances when they would not make it to the project because they would have to work in their fields in order for them to have money, according to Sunster 2015. And then, aside from the aforementioned programs, the Indigenous Peoples Education IPED program was also launched in 2016, but not all IPs, ITAs included, have fully embraced such a program. In a recent study of the ITAs in Mid-Baitan, the results revealed that the respondents are 21 to 76 years old, mostly female, and married. Most households have 4 to 5 members, and most have gone through elementary grades. And others made it to high school, but only 6.38% have gone to vocational or college level, according to Spirit of 2017. Thus, this only shows that despite the growing efforts for the education of the Indigenous ITAs, there is still a gap in their educational attainment. And that is why, allow me now to present here what are the promising future that's waiting for them for this slide. Actually, these are the reasons why some of them were not able to pursue their studies. First of it is financial problems. Out of 10 interviewees, 5 of them answered that financial problems or poverty became a hindrance in pursuing their study. They have explained that since they only depend on their location, their only source of income is through agriculture. And actually, the sad reality here, there was, it would also take them at least more over an hour in order for them to get to the city. And that is really the first challenge, financial problem, because they cannot work in their society during that time or even up until now. And then for the next slide. Okay, most of them or half of them also mentioned that some ITAs fell in love early. That is why they stopped their studies to take care of their children. First, with the first reason that poverty is the main problem. The second one is that falling in love too early was also a problem for them because they believe that since they are only settling with their people surrounding them, that they don't have any background of what is life outside their society, their community. They engage first into relationships like that, even though they are still young. And that is why, since they also got pregnant early, they believe that they no longer need to study. They just focus on their families. Okay. Next is for the family obligations. Being the eldest in the family, according to them, requires a big responsibility because their role is to become the second parent to their siblings when their parents are not around. Same is also true when raising a family. Since ITAs are struggling financially, the eldest needs to step in and also work for their living. So it's a family matter as well. Also, the next thing here is, do they still want to continue? Do they still want to finish their studies? The good thing here is that surprised us researchers the most is that despite all the hardships and problems they have encountered, ITAs still want to pursue their studies. Most of them even said that if they would be given chance or opportunity to be helped by the government in order for them to afford schooling or attending schools, they would go back and study again. And when they were asked what do they want to become if they will study, most of them said that they want to become teacher, they want to become medical frontliners, nurse, doctors, and for the guys, for the males, they revealed that they want to become policeman or men in uniform for serving for our country's protection, army, something like that. And finally, young ITAs are still determined, okay? They are still determined despite, I think, are they still determined? Yes. The answer here is that young ITAs are still determined to pursue their studies despite the challenges that they face. During the interview, we noticed that most of them possess self-determination. According also to Edward Deci and Richard Ryan's book entitled Self-Determination and Intrinsic Motivation in Human Behavior, people need to feel in control of their own behaviors and goals. And with this sense of being able to take care of their own direction or with their own path, this will result in a real change wherein it will play a major part in helping people feel that they are really self-determined and that they have self-determination that will eventually help them to set their goals. But actually, the main concern here is that even though they are determined, they are still seeking and asking for scholarships, benefits, and opportunities. That's why until now, they have these voices that they want to echo to everyone that even though they belong to the indigenous peoples, even though they are Aitas, there is nothing wrong with that because they believe that they are still part of this country. Okay, it's just so happened that they are different from usual Filipinos. And with that thinking of most people that they don't have any dreams of finishing their degrees or studies, that is wrong because according to them, they are really determined. They really want to finish their studies. All they want is just to have support from our government. Okay, and to provide some photo documentations when we had this interview last year, even before the pandemic came to the Philippines. Here is the next slide. Yes, that's me. And here are my co-researchers, and these are the children that we interviewed during that time. Actually, not all of them. Okay, for these children, they were not interviewed. Only this girl, this girl, this girl, this girl, this girl, and so on. And for our references, you may find it on the next slide. So that is all. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, so okay. Okay, so thank you very much for those wonderful presentations. We do have some questions in the chat box already. However, just very briefly, and so we can, I'm sorry, please mute yourself. Okay, so just very briefly, the three papers had to do with the various efforts to integrate IP education in the various school curricula. And the first paper is still a work in progress. And as they said, perhaps given the number of participants in this room, we do have something like 98 110 at a certain point. Perhaps you can also help them out by giving your input into how your specific, your own institutions are doing efforts towards this. Our second paper has to do with the integration of, well, dance as a cultural form into the curriculum and some of the challenges that this particular thing faces. One thing which I found truly interesting about this presentation was this matter of, and I think the question in the chat box is going to also lead into this, the matter of it being somehow not fully integrated, primarily because it has to do primarily with extracurricular activities. And the third one, a very interesting thing, primarily because, well, we do know the challenges that Indigenous communities face when it comes to education in general. And just, I don't mean to make it light of it, but how can you, after all, outlaw love? So maybe we can go into the question that has been asked in the chat box. And this is from Ms. Shirley Gumpad. I think this would be more target for Professor Anongos. However, the other panelists may want to chime in on this particular question. The question is, I understand the importance of letting the learners join extracurricular activities. However, it was observed that once they became involved in the extracurricular activities, they seem to neglect and have lost their interest and lose their interest in the academic subjects. What is your stand on this? And what can you suggest to keep or sustain learner interest in both this extracurricular activities and their academics? It's a very practical question, but I think it is a concern of educators in general. So, Professor Alangi, you are here. And I do know that Professor Alangi has actually done a lot of work with teaching indigenous communities. Okay, so
Yeah.
yes.
Hello. Hi, Prof. Grace.
Hello.
Thank you. I thought that was meant for Professor Anongos, for Stan. Pero so yeah, just to give my insights on the question, especially in relation to the experiences of UP Baguio. I think in the case of UP Baguio, we have the program for indigenous cultures, which also tries to whose primary objective is to lead the advocacy of indigenous issues in the university, and also it serves as a venue to gather our indigenous students. So from time to time, they're also tasked to hold performances, cultural performances. But I think the idea really is that this is a venue where they strengthen their sense of belonging to the university, so that the initial shock, of coming from the provinces and going to the university is somehow mitigated through these cultural organizations within the university. And the idea is for them to perform well or to succeed in their academics, even if they are involved in this extracurricular activities. So it shouldn't be an either or.
Yeah.
That's the idea. This performances, these groups within the university are supposed to help our indigenous students perform and to have a sense of belonging within the university, and to mitigate the initial cultural shock that they may encounter when they enter the university. So in the long run, sana instead of instead of the academics being sacrificed because of the involvement in these activities, sana mas they're complementary. So that's the idea. I know it's difficult, but that's the balance that we need to strike, so that our indigenous students are also able to perform well in the academics while being involved in these cultural performances. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Alangi. And I think that is the whole point. It's not an either or thing. It's primarily, instead of looking at them as extracurricular, something which is peripheralized, am I correct in saying that it should be integral to the formation of the student within the university? Professor Tindaan, Professor Anongos, are you also here? I don't think he is. Okay, so unfortunately he is not, because I also had wanted to probably talk about that notion of problems with authenticity when it comes to indigenous dance, that sort of thing. And perhaps since the panelist who is here, who would probably be able to address this would be Professor Tindaan. Are you here, Professor Tindaan?
I think Professor Tindahan has left.
Oh, she
Yes,
has
yes,
left.
I'm here. I'm
Ah,
here.
yeah,
She
there she
is
is.
there. There she is.
Yeah.
No, well, what struck me about Professor Nongos's thing was that how in the course of making it correct, sometimes that matter of the affective, community nature of it somehow already is infringed upon. So it somehow becomes a very interesting paradoxic idea, but how can preservation now become innovative too?
Yeah. I think to respond to the idea of how it can be innovative as well. One thing might be that which I itong takeaway ko dun sa plenary this morning, no, when Professor Kuyugeng was saying it should be a mindset in relation to how you do things. So it's not really about just performing because you are required by the university, just an add-on to a program, something like that, just to entertain guests or to be presented to international guests, especially. But it's to encourage the students to actually also engage in the idea of not only performance, but to integrate this in their academic formation. So let's say if you're performing, you're also looking into the the formations or the elements of the performance. So for example, maybe some students can be encouraged to do research in relation to the idea of performativity, their involvement in relation to the performance of their culture, and think hard about uh, their roles, their responsibilities in terms of performing. Because, for instance, if you are an IP member, you become a representative of your community. So again, this becomes it calls for what we call reflexivity. You now represent a certain community, and so it becomes you are quoted as the representation of a certain group. So perhaps we can encourage our students to think about these concepts further, rather than yun nga hindi lang siya performance para sa mga rituals ng universidad or ng local government, for example, kundi kasama yung academic na hindi lang academic kundi kahit personal din na discovery sa kanilang direction as IP students. To answer your question. Yeah, and I think
More or less.
Professor Anomos is here in the meeting, I think.
Yes. Professor Anongos?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, I'm sorry I can't, I do not have the camera, no? But I've been trying to join the conversation. I'm not sure I got, I think I did not get where we are, but I see some questions on the chat box.
Yes. Well, one of them is actually for you, sir. The thing about extracurricular and academic matters balance.
I'm reading different.
The first
questions
one
for me.
had to do with from Ms. Gumpad, and maybe this was really actually for you. And she says she understands the importance of letting learners join extracurricular activities. However, it's observed that once they join extracurricular activities, then the academics seem to wane. So what is your stand on this? And what can you suggest to keep or sustain the learner's interest in both the extracurricular and academic?
Yes. That's actually a serious concern, no? Balancing the curricular and the non-curricular. In fact, our performers at BSU and other performers around the region actually share the same concern that they actually sacrifice a lot for the representations that they do for the school. But that's the point, no? That's the point. It doesn't have to be extracurricular. So if we could make cultural dances be integrated into the curricular, then we we sustain cultural dances. At the same time, we are performing as students. No? They are performing as students. No? So we erase the problem between curricular and extracurricular.
Yes.
So I'd like to continue that also by answering another question
Yes.
posted on the chat about CHED monitoring the um, what do you call this memorandum, no, on integration. The memorandum came out in 2019, but as I've said, I do not think that higher education um, institutions are really serious about this one. It says in the memorandum that this school should be submitting accomplishment results relating to this, but I, I I haven't heard even in our institution that they do include an item in the accomplishment report to CHED uh, on uh, on things related to the integration of Cordillera culture to the curriculum. So this is the whole point of the paper, Din, no? That uh, we have to really go beyond the extracurricular and make it part of the curricular in all institutions.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that, sir. Professor Stindaan and Professor Alangi, perhaps you'd like to chime in on this question as well, because it was also actually for you, for the first presenter. Did the CHED systematically monitor in the course of your
Yeah,
research?
so Ruth, you want to answer that? O ako na lang muna.
Kaya na lang, sir. Kaya na lang, sir.
Yeah, actually, we are planning to do that because in the CHED memo, sabi nga ni Professor Anongos, the CHED regional officers are supposed to monitor the implementation of the different SUCs in relation to the memo. But um, the research first concentrated on getting information on how these SUCs are implementing them, and we plan to validate by going to CHED and see whether they're able to comply nga with that requirement for them to submit reports to CHED and for CHEDRO to monitor the implementation. But as Professor Anongos already said, na parang in the experience of BSU, they don't seem to be nga naman, reporting. So it's probably part of the challenges in the implementation of the memo. Kasi it only started in 2019, and then we had the pandemic. That's why very limited din pa yung information that we are able to gather in relation to the implementation. That's also the reason why we are recommending for a more systematic guideline or direction from CHED and within the institutions itself. Kasi parang feeling nga namin the implementation is quite sporadic pa and hindi masyadong harmonized and coordinated. So there are a lot of things that can be done still because it's a good objective, no? Yung the what the memo is trying to accomplish is quite important. We just need to do it more systematically and help each other out para mas ma-accomplish natin yung objectives ng memo. Thank you.
So thank you very, very much for that. Oh, it is already 2:31. There are still some questions in the chat box, but perhaps you can contact the presenters directly as the next panel is going to be starting, or perhaps it's already starting at this very moment. So thank you very much for attending this panel, and we hope you have a fruitful day ahead and more fruitful days to come. Okay, so thank you.